Hey YouTube, today we are talking about monster effects. And you?
We're gonna be going across the different types of monster effects when they're activated and the differences between some of our examples. So yeah, let's get started. Alright, so first example I have is Mobius, the Frost Monarch. It states when this card is tribute summoned, you can target up to 2 spell and trap cards on the field to destroy those targets. It's pretty simple. It's activated when summoned. My other summoned effect is Tellarknight Deneb. If it's summoned, you can add a Tellarknight monster from your deck to your hand except for itself. Now, when you look at these two cards, you'll notice a difference. One is a when effect. So one says when it's tribute summoned. The other says if it's summoned. Now, the key word in that sentence is if and when. Because Mobius is not a mandatory effect to destroy 2 spell or trap cards, he can miss timing. And what that means is if you somehow tribute summon him in the middle of a chain, he will not be able to destroy the 2 spell and trap cards.
Which is possible because there's the, what is that, continuous trap, escalation of the monarchs, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
That one will...
I believe... Yeah. And Tellarknight Deneb says if it's summoned, so if it's summoned in any way, you can add it, and this means that if he's summoned in the middle of a chain, then he is allowed to search because he was summoned. Because to get a when effect off, it has to be the very last thing. And to get an if effect off, like Deneb, it just has to happen at any given point and not be negated.
Exception, if you play in TCG United States, in particular, if he gets Call of the Haunted back, and they, what is it, if they MST the Call of the Haunted and you respond with it and it summons him, he doesn't get his effect.
Yeah.
Some stupid rule.
I never understood that ruling myself, because he technically was summoned, because they chained the Call of the Haunted to him. But anyway, moving on. I'm going to talk about flip effects. Flip effects only happen when you set the monster first. The monster has to be face down, and then it has to flip face up. So that could be them attacking into it, you flip summoning it, which we covered in our summoning video. And we have Penguin Soldier. So flip, you can target up 2 monsters on the field, return those targets to the hand. Note, I do not believe flip effects can miss timing. Am I correct, Stefan?
I have not actually seen an instance where they can miss, because they just... Fundamentally, I don't think they can.
Yeah, but I believe a flip effect is more of a triggered ability, like, because it get flipped face up, but I don't, because I also, if it's attacked and flipped face up, it activates in the damage step.
Well, it activates like at the end of all the calculation and stuff, I believe. So it activates in a different window of when it's flipped face up, so I imagine it can't miss timing. I've never actually seen it happen before, but flip effects don't get used very often. Also, don't mistake this with a card that says when this card is flip summoned, because a monster getting attacked and flip face up is not a flip summoned. And there are cards that interact with it that way, but you don't see many of them anymore. A good example is like Swarm of Scarabs.
Or Stealth Bird. Yeah, alright, so flip effects, they're pretty simple. It's just you gotta flip them face up. And yeah, I've never seen one miss timing, so I'm assuming they can't miss timing. So yeah, next is graveyard effects, and we have 3 examples. We have Juin, Light of the Yang Zing, Luna Light Blue Cat, and Mizuki. Now, these three are very different activated abilities. Or not activated, they're all very different graveyard effects. Chewin and Luna Light Blue Cat are pretty similar, actually, because they're when they're destroyed by battle or by card effect. Well, actually, Chewin is when he's destroyed. Luna Light Blue Cat is if. Now, and as we talked about earlier, ifs can never miss timing unless really awkward situations.
Wait, there's an awkward situation where they miss?
Well, I mean, just like the Teller Knight Deneb one.
Oh yeah, TCG awkward, yeah.
Yeah, okay. But I don't think Blue Cat can miss timing in any way because if you did it the other way, logically it did hit the field and then it did die by a card effect.
Yeah.
So, but then again, Teller Knight Deneb was technically special summoned, and yeah. But anyway, yeah. But Chewin can miss timing if he was destroyed in the middle of a chain somewhere, and Blue Cat can never miss timing, even if it was destroyed in the middle of a chain, because if effects. And is there anything you want to add, Stefan?
Yeah, the way it works is because there are cards that'll destroy him, and it feels like he should miss timing with Chewin, but it doesn't. That's stuff like Metaphors don't cause him to, because it's called simultaneous. You destroy and then search, or you destroy and search simultaneously. So there are effects that make it seem like it would miss timing, but it doesn't. But we won't go too far into those yet, because that's probably a whole nother video on another aspect of the game that we're eventually going to have to explain. But
yeah, it's
a good rule of thumb for, I believe it's TCG United States, unless it's an exception, the card has to stay where it resolves to activate its effect, I believe is what it is how they were doing that. I don't know, I think it's a load of crap, and I really don't like discussing it too much, because it's way more confusing.
Alright. Why Mizuki is on here in the graveyard section, because he has a graveyard effect, but he doesn't have one when he's destroyed. He has an activated effect that you can activate during your main phase. So he says you can banish this card from your graveyard, then target a zombie monster you control or in your graveyard, and then special summon that. So he's in here because, unlike the other two graveyard effects we've shown, you have to actually activate him. The other ones you have to activate too, because they are optional effects. But with Mizuki, he don't get his effect when he's destroyed. You just, during your main phase, you use his effect from your graveyard.
Yeah. Yeah, Mizuki works like that. He's only on your turn when you have priority to do something on your main phase.
Yeah. Moving along, we have Blackluster Soldier, Envoy of the Beginning, and Masterpiece, the true Draco Slaying King, and we're also going to talk about Castel in this. So these are activated. All three of these are activated abilities. So their Masterpiece is a quick effect. Blackluster Soldier, Envoy of the Beginning isn't, and Castel is also here as another example of an activated ability.
Note that we're talking about the first effect of Blackluster Soldier, Envoy at the Beginning, and most likely the second effect for Castel, but I think his first one is also, yeah. Okay, so both of Castel's effects are activated.
So I'm going to talk about Castel and Masterpiece first. Castel and Masterpiece are here because, well, Masterpiece is here because he's a quick effect that you pay his cost, which is also why Castel is here, which is banishing a continuous spell or trap card from your graveyard. Okay, and then you target a free card in the field, one other card in the field, and destroy it. So Castel's effect reads, his long effect is You can detach one Xyz material from this card, then target one face-up monster on the field. Change it to face-down defense position. You can detach two materials from this card, then target one other face-up card on the field. Shuffle it into the deck. You can only use one Castel the Sky Blaster Musketeer effect per turn, and only once that turn. Now, so what this means is, if you wanted to activate Castel's effect, let's say you wanted to use his Detach 2 to target a card and shuffle it back into the deck. So what this means is, you detach the two materials and declare your target, and then your opponent has a chance to respond. So, yeah, you talk about cost. That's
pretty easy. It's a pretty easy thing to see. It's just that's why sometimes people always look at the other player and say pay or cost, and then you pay the cost, and then they typically respond. Unless you know preemptively that there's something underneath that card, you really don't want to go to the grave at that moment. Like if there was a Mizuki under this Castel, then on summoning I'd probably breakthrough skillet or something just to not let that Mizuki go to the grave. So,
yeah,
there's that.
Well, if Mizuki's under Castel, the activation is detaching 2 as a cost, so it's going to happen no matter what.
No, because if you do on summoning, you can break through it, then they can't activate the effect.
It can still activate.
Can it really with breakthrough?
Yes. Yeah. It doesn't say the effect. Breakthrough just negates the effects. It doesn't negate the attempting activation.
Huh. What would be a negating activation card?
It would be like the True King of all calamities is what you're thinking of.
Ah, yeah, that one. Yeah.
So that would, if you on summon declared win, then they couldn't use Castel's effect. Or doesn't really matter, True King, for example, but yeah. But yeah, Breakthrough, it would just negate it. It'd be like Fiendish Chain, Stefan. Breakthrough is like a Fiendish Chain that can activate in your graveyard. Anyway.
The more you know.
Blackluster Soldier, Envoy at the beginning here, is just because his first effect is target one monster on the field, banish that target face up. You cannot attack, or this card cannot attack the turn it is activated. So that's an activated effect. And when you activate it, you declare your target, then your opponent has a chance to respond, similar to Castel. But Blackluster Soldier doesn't have to detach materials or discard cards or pay life points or any other type of cost. Also, as we went over in our summoning video, the special summoning of Blackluster Soldier Envoy at the beginning is an inherent summon and not an effect. Just figured I'd mention that.
Yep.
While we're here.
And his second effect is a triggered effect. If he destroys a monster by battle, then he may make a second attack in a row. That means that you have to attack after you've destroyed the monster and sent to the graveyard. You have to make another attack with him, or else you don't get that extra attack. So you can't just go, attack with this instead, and then attack with him again. That's not how it works. It's how the card reads. It says in a row.
Okay, so the next card I'm going to talk about is Cyframe Lord Omega. Now, the reason he's on here is he's also an activated effect, who happens to be a quick effect too. But the reason he's on here is to talk about him returning. Okay, because his effect is, once returned during the main phase, quick effect, you can banish both this card face up from the field, and one random card from your opponent's hand face up until your next standby phase. So, what happens is, he activates, then your opponent has a chance to respond, and then he banishes.
Note that his banishing is not cost.
Yeah. And then when he returns to the field, not even when he returns to the field, like during your next standby phase, the turn player that owns the Omega, or the player that owns the Omega during their next standby phase, no matter what, they get their card back. So even if you use Pot of Acquisitiveness or Burial from the different dimension to put the Omega back into the graveyard or shuffle it into the deck, you will still get your card back if your opponent takes or card from your hand.
To clarify, what he's saying is that, yeah, the card that's taken from the hand is still returned unless the card itself is put back into the grave. Or put into the grave if it's moved the location from where it's supposed to be. And even if the card is moved locations and put back the location, it still doesn't return to the hand because it's not considered to be the exact same card that was targeted with that effect.
Also, while we're on side frame Lord Omega, I'd also like to talk about his once per turn during your opponent's standby phase, you can target a banished card, return it to the graveyard. That effect actually can target face down banished cards, like from Pot of Desires.
Yes. And it's also a triggered effect, I believe, because it happens during the standby, and it's not like you can chain two of their effects together, or two Omegas on the field to do that. It actually, one resolves, does its thing, and then the next one resolves, does its thing, assuming the opponent doesn't interact with it.
Yeah. And what happens with that, if you're returning a banished card that's face down, you select it, then you target it, then you flip it face up when it goes back into your graveyard.
Yes.
That's about it. It also has an activated graveyard effect too. So Omega has a lot of effects. And to briefly summarize that one, it's similar to Mizuki in when you can activate it. So Omega has a lot of effects that activate during your opponent's turn, like his first effect can, and his standby phase has to. But his graveyard effect, where if he's in your graveyard, you can target another card in the graveyard. That means both graveyards, by the way. Shuffle both that card and this card from the graveyard into the deck. So what that means is you can only activate that effect, like Mizuki, during your own main phase if it is your side frame Lord Omega.
Yep.
You can target your opponent's cards in their graveyard too if you wish.
Yeah, you can target your opponent's Mizuki in the grave. It feels terrible being on the receiving end of that.
Alright, last card we're talking about is Exodia, the forbidden one.
Now, skip over Lumina? Or are you going to skip over the Lightsworn Summoner? Or I guess we already covered.
Yeah, we covered cost and activation, and she has a mandatory
effect
that happens during the end phase. And so you always have to mill those cards.
Yeah.
About it. We've already covered cost, which is discarding. But the mandatory effects, as the name would suggest, they are mandatory. You have to do them. If a player misses that, then they should get a warning from your judge, and
depending on how far it is in the game, it can also be a game loss.
Yeah. So like if they go, I end my turn, and then the opponent draws, and then they go, oh wait, I forgot to mill my 3 cards from the Lumina, then it's a warning, and they mill their 3 because it's not an irreversible game state.
But say you activated Reckless Greed and then went, oh, I forgot to mill, and you already drew the cards in your hand and everything like that, and like your hand was shuffled. Yeah, that's a game loss, typically.
Yeah.
There's no reversing the game state on that. Okay, last card. Exodia, the forbidden one. This is not an effect.
Yes, it's just a condition. If your opponent reveals all 5 pieces of Exodia, you lose. There's nothing you can do about it. The same, and I guess we should have put it in here, but Ghost Trick, Angel of Mischief, her effect, her win condition effect, can be completed through skill drain. So, because win conditions are conditions and not effects. So when the number of Xyz materials on this card becomes 10, you win the duel. Even if she's out on the field through a skill drain, if you find a way to get her that 10th material, you still win because it's a condition, and win conditions are their own thing. There's nothing that can interact with them once they meet their condition. The game ends immediately.
Think of it this way. The game state is always checking if a win condition is going to happen, no one ever really mentions it unless it actually happens.
Yeah.
And God, what was the ruling on Exodia? Exodia can win in the middle of the chain, right?
Yes,
After
it
effect
instantly
resolves.
happens.
Because I know before it was you had to resolve the chain, and then a player could lose if they drew their deck before they got the Exodia win. But I think it's he can win at the next opportunity after a card effect has resolved successfully.
Yeah, and the reason that works is because it doesn't, because win conditions don't activate. Just instantly the game is over once you complete it. It just, you keep, because the game state, like Stefan said, permanently checks for the win condition no
After
matter what
every card
happens.
resolves, after every card actually successfully resolves, technically the game state checks, is Exodia in his hand? Is this win condition happening? No? Okay. But it's not something that, like, that's a very layman's term of it, because it's not actually what happens. It's just an easy way to explain that that's how that happens.
Yeah. Yep. So I think that's gonna do it. I don't. I think we covered everything. Do you think we missed anything, Seven?
Maybe hand traps, but that could be a whole video all in itself.
Well, hand traps are basically just quick effects that you can activate from monster effects that you can activate from your hand.
Yeah.
Like Max C, which is a very common one. Max C can activate during either player's turn. You send it to the graveyard. This turn, each time your opponent special summons monsters, immediately draw a card. That draw is mandatory after you activate it. So,
and it interrupts the chain too. Well, it doesn't interrupt, but it activates in the middle of chains. The draw of it.
The drawing doesn't activate,
or no, it
so
just
it just
happens.
Yeah. So notice the thing, it says immediately. So that allows it to happen even if your opponent special summons multiple times in a chain.
But
that's about it. Also, the only thing else I could think about for hand traps is if it says you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard. If your opponent has out Macrocosmos or Dimensional Fissure, you cannot activate the Max C because it cannot be sent to the graveyard.
Yep. I think that should cover everything that we could. We'll probably make a part 2 to this eventually because we'll have figured something we probably missed. But
probably.
I think that should do it. Until next time, something dark side.